Hi, this is Pat DeLuca. Welcome to DP2 Insights. In this video, we're going to be talking about the render engine, which is the methodology we use in DP2 to control what's happening at the printer. When you create a printer using the printer wizard, hopefully, in DP2, you essentially create or set up a render engine. Render engines, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this process, are controlled primarily from the workstation on which they're created, and usually they're created by or with, in conjunction with the computer that's running the printer. So to start up a printer is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to go ahead and specify my sample printer and get it started. In DP2, when you render a job, when you export an image or export an order item, you are essentially running it through the render engine, which is using the specifications from the printer queue, the job, the printer queue, and then the printer data table. As you can see, this had work in the job queue. And one of the strategies in DP2 for a lot of labs is that you queue up a lot of your work, and when you turn the printer on, the work starts to go off to the printer, and then you can feed the printer over the course of whatever that production cycle is. The render engine control window, as you can see here, start and shut down. Shut down now means that it's going to interrupt a batch. If you select shut down, it'll go ahead and wait until that batch is over before it turns it off. You can suspend and resume if you're using the render engine control to send work to perhaps a disk folder or some sort of hot folder implementation, and there, you run out of paper. That will allow you to suspend the queue and then resume it, given that you don't have this type of printer control, in which case, say as an example, you're using the RP30. So you have some extra functionality because that's called bidirectional control, which means that the RP30 is talking to DP2 and providing information, and DP2 is providing information to it. And there are some printer relationships between Kodak and other manufacturers that allow us to connect in a more meaningful way. The Next Press is another example, and there are some others, including some Noritsu printers. So that, depending on the output and depending on what other controls, whether you're using an application, will determine how much functionality you will see active in these windows. The Performance tab is a way to manage the behavior of the render engine based on the processing power of the computer. So it's set by default to multiple CPU optimization concurrent to. There are some recommendations in the help file about using the Performance tab, and this is one place where I actually will bring it in. It'll allow you to go through the help files to give you some insight into how this works, including some recommendations based on the number of CPUs that you're working with and how many. What concurrent means is that it'll use multiple threads. So if it's got one job going or one activity happening, that it may use a second thread in order to start another one so that it can be doing two things at one time. The work delay is set by default to 60 seconds. What that means is that after 20 seconds in DP2, if there's no work, it's going to default to the second cycle will be 60 seconds or whatever you set that variable at, before DP2 will go out and ping the folder to look for more work, or the printer, or whatever your implementation is. This setup is going to allow you to actually see the setup of the printer and open all three of those tables: the job queue, the printer queue, and the printer data table. If you are in a lab where you have multiple render engines running and you're an administrator, that can help to see what's happening from this. The diagnostics, of course, are generally used when there's a problem, but you can get to the session logs from here, so that if you need to understand what's happening, the session log is going to give you all of that information, as well as the ability, if this is the type of lab and you need this type of functionality, to monitor the memory, to get a sense of what's happening, to look for what's happening with your virtual memory, especially if you're using virtual memory or large memory mode in DP2. So that's essentially what's happening. In theory, though, if you create a printer and you are running work, the render engine is going to allow you access to that imaging engine, that which is kind of the heart of DP2. So that is the render engine control window. I do want to highlight a couple of other little things. The job queue for the sample printer, which is empty because we ran the work that was in it when I started, and as you can see in operations, it rendered 19 of them. The job queue allows you access to the individual jobs, and there's some things that you can do to act on it, including changing the queue of a particular job, changing the status, changing the priority, so that if you had a job that was suddenly a rush job, you could bump it to the top of the queue. And for those of you who aren't familiar with using priorities in DP2, 50 is the default, 51 and above are shades of higher priority, and 50 and below or 49 and below are shades of a lower priority. But this is really, when you're running a job in DP2, this is what's happening. Thank you.